Of all the financial titans and philanthropists of the 20th century, none are more complex or mysterious than George Soros. Like Carnegie, J.P. Morgan, and the Rockefellers, he amassed billions through ruthless business decisions, only to turn around and give away most of his fortune to advance his own personal philosophy. He can move world financial markets simply by voicing an opinion, or destabilize a government by buying and selling its currency. Right now, his Quantum Group hedge fund moves $14 billion of rich investors' money around the world every day, looking for profits and answering to no one. Soros makes huge bets on whole countries and economies. Last year, when he saw cracks in the Asia boom, he began selling the currency in Thailand. Traders in Hong Kong followed suit, triggering a financial crisis that plunged much of Asia into a depression.
In the last 2 years, you've been blamed for financial collapse of Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Japan, and Russia.
Yeah, all of the above.
All of the above.
Yeah.
The Prime Minister of Malaysia said that the region spent 40 years trying to build up its economy, and along comes a moron like Soros with a lot of money, and it's all over. He called you a criminal.
I think that I've been blamed for everything. I am basically there to make money. I cannot and do not look at the social consequences of what I do.
When the Russian market began falling apart in August, Soros was the country's single largest investor. He called the U.S. Treasury and asked Uncle Sam for $7 billion to prop up the ruble. When U.S. officials failed to intervene, Soros wrote a letter to the Financial Times of London saying he thought the Russian currency should be devalued by as much as 25%. A few words from Soros were enough to cause panic selling that fueled the crash.
What's it like to have a statement that you make have such serious, grievous consequences? I mean, you can, it looks to me like in a number of situations you can take a position against a currency or make a statement, and the whole country falls apart.
Well, it's a tremendous sense of responsibility, actually. And it's also a humbling experience because I am actually trying to do the right thing, and sometimes what I do has an unintended negative consequence, as it did in Russia.
In places like Haiti, a country that has less money in the bank than he does. Last month, he brought the First Lady with him for a look at some of the projects his foundation is funding.
This is Mr. George Soros, and he's going to be helping the hospital.
And in Ukraine, he spent millions retraining the old Soviet military.
At the center of George Soros, there's an inherent contradiction.
Which is?
Which is, on one hand, you're the capitalist who does not care about the social consequences of his act, and on the other hand, you are a philanthropist who cares only about social consequences. How do you resolve the two?
Recognizing that as a competitor, I've got to compete to win. As a human being, I am concerned about the society in which I live.
Which George Soros am I talking to now? The amoral George Soros or the moral George Soros?
It's one person. It's one person who at one time engages in amoral activities and at the rest of the time tries to be moral.
To understand the complexities and contradictions in his personality, you have to go back to the very beginning, to Budapest, where George Soros was born 68 years ago to parents who were wealthy, well-educated, and Jewish. When the Nazis occupied Budapest in 1944, George Soros' father was a successful lawyer. He lived on an island in the Danube and liked to commute to work in a rowboat. But knowing there were problems ahead for the Jews, he decided to split his family up. He bought them forged papers, and he bribed a government official to take 14-year-old George Soros in and swear that he was his Christian godson. But survival carried a heavy price tag. While hundreds of thousands of Hungarian Jews were being shipped off to the death camps, George Soros accompanied his phony godfather on his appointed rounds, confiscating property from the Jews. These are pictures from 1944 of what happened to George Soros' friends and neighbors.
You're a Hungarian Jew who escaped the Holocaust by posing as a Christian.
Right.
And you watched Lots of people get shipped off to the death camps.
Right. I was 14 years old. And I would say that that's when my character was made.
My understanding is that you went out with this protector of yours who swore that you were his adopted godson.
Yes, yes.
Went out, in fact, and helped in the confiscation of property from the Jews.
That's right.
Was it difficult?
Not at all. Not at all. Maybe as a child you don't see the connection, but it created no problem at all.
No feeling of guilt.
No.
For example, that I'm Jewish, and here I am watching these people go. I could just as easily be there. I should be there. None of that.
Well, actually, funny way, it's just like in markets, that if I weren't there, of course I wasn't doing it, but somebody else would be taking it away anyhow. In other words, whether I was there or not, I was only a spectator, the property was being taken away.
Are you religious?
No.
Do you believe in God?
No.
Soros told us he believes God was created by man, not the other way around, which may be why he thinks he can smooth out the world's imperfections. When we went with him to Ukraine, he was treated like a visiting head of state and was received by the president. Then he was received by the prime minister and finally the central bank.
20% in cash.
They even allowed him to look at the books and asked him for advice. Lots of people want George Soros' advice. Most recently, South African President Nelson Mandela.
Actually, President Mandela asked me, how could South Africa protect itself against speculators like you? And I told him, I wrote him a memo, trying to give him the best advice I could, how to reduce the exposure of South Africa to speculative attack.
That's the old stop me before I kill again approach, right?
Well,
you're telling this is what you can do to stop me.
Whether I or somebody else does whatever is happening in the markets, it really doesn't make any difference to the outcome. I don't feel guilty because I'm engaged in an amoral activity which is not meant to have anything to do with guilt.
Part of the reason he is so rich is that the Soros hedge funds operate offshore in the Netherlands Antilles to avoid scrutiny by the Securities and Exchange Commission. So even while Soros tells Congress and the Treasury that hedge funds must be regulated to stop the global crisis, he's avoiding the rules.
We are not
licensed to do business in the United States.
That's right.
Because?
Because we are not registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission. Because we find it more convenient to operate without it.
So in some ways it's to escape regulation.
Yeah, that's right.
But you've been sitting here talking about the need for regulation.
Yes, and whatever regulations are imposed, we will obey. We will.
George Soros, in a way, is Donald Trump without the humility.
One of your money manager told us that George really does think he's a god.
After 2 Iraqi refugees were detained inside the JFK airport in New York, a crowd of protesters seemed to appear immediately out of nowhere. Within hours, that initial crowd had swelled to hundreds. They filled the sidewalks and packed 3 stories of a parking garage. Masses of people driven by sheer emotion, all chanting and waving signs and pre-printed banners. It is an intense reaction to President Trump's polarizing decision to temporarily ban travel to the United States from 7 Islamic nations in the Middle East. The protests have spread to other airports across the country. How did these protests organize so quickly? The truth is that they were already planned and ready to go, and behind it all is the funding of billionaire Nazi collaborator and notorious open borders globalist George Soros.
We are learning more tonight about just who may have been behind sponsoring at least several groups who took part in Saturday's Women's Marches around the country and here in Washington. Correspondent Peter Ducey tells us it's also unclear whether the anti-Trump movement will go on indefinitely.
More than 3 million Americans spent this Saturday protesting President Trump, according to a pair of professors who did the math. Their cause has been bankrolled, at least in part recently, by the liberal billionaire George Soros, who's donated millions of dollars to more than 50 of this weekend's participants, including Planned Parenthood, Human Rights Watch, and the NAACP. The Women's March makes a promise on its website, quote, "We work peacefully while recognizing there is no true peace without justice and equality for all." But all were apparently not welcomed on Saturday.
We know of many of these pro-life groups who actually tried to apply. They were accepted at first for the march. And then afterwards, when they found out who these groups were, which were some of them were like life pregnancy centers, they were denied access to go into the march.
Go back to 2014. You'll find me talking about how Soros was funding neo-Nazi groups in Ukraine. He wanted them to act as violent agitators in Kiev to throw the nation into a state of anarchy because the CIA was in the process of trying to instigate a coup against the pro-Russian government there. The New World Order chiefs recruit fresh blood through its annual Bilderberg group meetings so that they can widen their base, widen their network of control around the world. But a select, and even among them, a select handful of these top Bilderbergers, including some Bohemian Grove members, they meet together and they coordinate the plans that have been handed down to them. Some of these Bilderbergers are part of the Council of 300, and it's these kinds of people who are hell-bent on creating a one-world government, a socialist system, with themselves as the masters. They've been reaching down. It's just incredible. They have this amazing reach that goes way from the top all the way down into the very fabric of our society. And Soros is a major player in all this. In 2015, I talked a lot about the involvement of Soros in the radical gay rights movement over the last couple years. Soros loves to use radical gay activists to accomplish his dirty work. These people are junkyard dogs, and it's easy to manipulate them. And just like all idiots, these people think that they are acting freely and independently. They have no idea that there are strings attached to them that are being pulled by a puppet master like Soros.
Here in the nation's capital, this really is the nucleus, the center point of this movement that is gathering today on what's being called the March for Our Lives. So many families have come from across the country to descend here, right on Pennsylvania Avenue. You're hearing the stage right now where it is very celebratory. There's a lot of music, and then the rally gets underway with a number of keynote addresses coming from something like 20 speakers, many of whom are under the age of 18. And then, of course, they have a star-studded list of performers. Renee Marsh is in the crowd there. Renee, give me an idea who you've been talking to, what are they saying, and what's drawn them here?
All of these young people are here in Washington, D.C. for something they are so passionate about. When you talk to these young people, they want to see a change, and they will not go and they will not be quiet until they see that change. These young people holding all of their signs, they're here with one message. They want stricter gun laws. You know, the Trump administration just on Friday, they proposed a rule which would essentially ban bump stocks, that gun accessory that would make it possible for an individual with a weapon to essentially fire automatically. But the people in this crowd say that is not enough. They want to see more. They want to see the age raised for purchasing a gun. They want to see an all-out ban on assault weapons. And you can bet that that is the sort of thing that we're going to be hearing throughout the afternoon here, Fred, as this march gets set to get underway.
My message for the people in office is you're either with us or against us.
Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists.
We are losing our lives while the adults are playing around. And we have received endless support from your generation, and we thank everybody for that immensely because we really appreciate it. We don't need you.
If you're not with me, then you're my enemy.
Only a Sith deals in absolutes.
We have our lives on the line here, and at the end of the day, that is going to be what's bringing us to victory and to making some sort of right out of this tragedy. is this is about us begging for our lives.
Look, a lot of people are trying to take us down quickly. They're trying to discredit us. They're trying to say we don't know what we're talking about.
If you're in a situation where you need to carry a gun around to protect that just seems like there's other avenues you can go.
Like what?
Like find a different area to live in.
Some of them have called you actors.
Well, I am an actor, actually. I'm in Spring Awakening right now at the Barclay Performing Arts Center. It's a great show. What I'm saying is, you could say that we don't know what we're talking about because we're 17 years old, but until you've been on the receiving end of an AR-15, until you've been locked into your class. Look, Wayne LaPierre, Dana Loesch.
Right.
I don't know if you guys have ever had to deal with that, but as far as I know, that's not the case. We've been locked in a classroom. We have seen our friends text their parents goodbye. We are the experts. We know exactly what we're talking about. How dare you tell us we don't know what we're...
I'm friend. Friends. Let's take that again. Cameron, scene 2. Yes, agreed.
People have mental health issues where we're all super stressed. I don't think that it's necessary to have guns in those classrooms in such
Well, how uncomfortable would you feel if a shooter comes to your classroom and you're sitting there like, oh my God, I have this wooden desk?
Well, I would hope that there are, security, campus security.
I don't know if you've ever seen any of these shootings that go on, but usually it takes a few minutes and by then there's a body count.
Okay.
You don't want anyone in there to have the ability to be able to maybe take that guy out?
I mean, if that was, I would rather security handle it if that's the case.
We are the experts.
Wake up.